Hi everyone, and welcome to our webinar on how to finance your executive MBA at the Yale School of Management. My name is Rebecca Melville, and I'm the director of the Office of Financial Aid for the school. And I thought I'd spend some time with you today walking through some options that you have on financing your MBA, including loans, scholarships, and also our generous loan forgiveness program. As you can see, we're using GoToMeeting for this session, so should you have any questions, please feel free to type them in, and I will answer them as they come through. You don't need to wait in order to ask a question. So without further ado, I will try to go through the slides, although I'm having a hard time. Oh, there we go. So the tuition information for the program, as you can see, is $152,500 for the entire program. Those are for the folks entering this in the next cycle of the program, so that's approximately $76,000 a year. And that includes essentially everything, not only tuition, but as well as an electronic device, accommodation for the in-residence weeks, and parking, etc. So it is an all-inclusive annual tuition fee. I'm going to jump right in and talk about student loans. Essentially, there are two kinds of student loans that you are eligible to take out, or frankly, most people are eligible to take out in order to fund the cost of attendance. So generally speaking, financial aid at any institution, graduate and professional, is done on an annual basis. So I'll be speaking to approximately $76,000 a year that you'll be applying to. Of course, you do that for 2 years for this program. And just to kind of briefly go through the advantages or disadvantages of federal loans versus private loans. Obviously, federal loans, you have to be a U.S. citizen or a green card holder. How they work is for all graduate and professional loans, your first $20,500 a year is essentially an entitlement loan, which means that as long as you have applied and are admitted to the MBA program here, you can borrow up to $20,500. The only time that you're denied that is if you've ever defaulted on a previous student loan, or if you've reached some kind of lifetime limit. Again, that's very, very rare. Anything you need to borrow over and above that $20,500 on an annual basis, you borrow via direct plus loans. There is a little bit more credit history that goes into determining whether or not you're eligible to apply for the direct plus loans. And I'll walk through each of those loans separately and their interest rates and their repayment terms essentially. But to compare federal loans to private loans, federal loans now have more competitive rates, frankly, after this newest act of Congress. But on occasion, and particularly for our MBA audience, many times you can actually get more aggressive rates if you go to a private bank vendor, because they're going to base this entirely on your credit scores. And so you may be able to get a more advantageous rate, but it's still going to be on an annual basis only. All international students are eligible to borrow private loans if you have a U.S. guarantor. If you do not, you are eligible to borrow through the international student loan here at Yale. Any reputable private loan will have no prepayment penalty and should also have a grace period. I'll talk to what those are in a couple of minutes. So again, this is the first loan that's kind of essentially your first line of defense in applying for aid from the federal government. If you're accepted to the program, and frankly, probably any program in the United States, and you're a U.S. citizen and you want federal aid, you fill out the FAFSA, which is the Federal Application for Student Aid. Your entitlement loan, you can fund up to $20,500 a year. Anything over that, and I'll talk to this on the next slide, you're going to borrow in direct plus funds. Now, the current rate for this loan is 5.41% with a 1% origination fee, which is essentially deducted at the time of disbursement. So if you borrow the full $20,500, you get something closer to $20,250 once that's been deducted. However, the latest act of Congress makes these rates tied to the 10-year Treasury rate, so that's going to float again every year. And it gets locked in the summer, and if you take a loan out for 1 year, for example, it'll be locked in for the life of that loan. Most repayment schedules are 10-year repayment schedules, but federal loans, the advantage over a federal loan, over a private loan, is that there is some flexibility on the back-end repayment. So if you can prove any kind of income sensitivity, you can usually prolong your repayment schedule. So think of trading off flexibility over potentially money savings, which is what you would have with a private loan. There are no more subsidized federal loans. You may remember subsidized federal loans if you took out aid during your undergraduate degree here in the United States. Those are loans where interest does not accrue when you're enrolled. All loans now at the graduate and professional level in the U.S. are unsubsidized, meaning interest is accruing from the time that the loan is disbursed. However, there is a 6-month grace period for federal loans after graduation, which means your first payments would be due in November. So this is a little bit more about the Direct Plus loan. So essentially, if you figure out the delta between $76,000 and $20,500, that is, if again the FAFSA, the Federal Application for Student Aid, says that you have need, then you can borrow those additional funds minus any scholarships that you may have in Federal Direct Plus. Historically, in the past, these were not always the best rates. 6.41 is a reasonable rate, but again, for this audience, you may be able to get more aggressive rates by going out to a private vendor. Generally speaking, the best combination that works for the most number of people is some combination of private vendor funds and federal funds. So doing the entitlement loan, $20,500, and then often going out to a vendor to get a private loan for the additional funds. However, there is a credit rating element. It's a much lower bar to pass than a private vendor will have, but there's a standard 6-month grace period, 10-year repayment scheme. And again, simple interest accrues. So private education loans will work a little bit differently on the front end, obviously, because you apply through a vendor, but all loans are actually certified by the Office of Financial Aid in the school that you attend, obviously including this one. They are going to be more aggressive on looking at your credit ratings. And there are many that actually have variable rates. In fact, a couple of years ago, almost all of the loans had variable credit rates. Now more and more vendors are getting back into the fixed rate loan market. If you're admitted here, there's actually a list of vendors that have been used by this graduate and professional students at Yale over the past several years, and that can be a great first place to start. And they often have some really terrific information on their websites whereby you go and type in your information and they will give you different repayment plans and right there real time. Again, there are no such things as subsidized private education loans. So interest accrues as soon as that loan is disbursed. If you're an international student and you have a U.S. cosigner, you may be eligible to take out a private education loan. So for our international students, you can borrow up to approximately $60,000 it is this year, which is the cost of tuition mandatory fees in our other MBA program. The remaining funds you would have to find through scholarship funds or through personal financing. Again, there's a origination fee here of 5% taken off at the time of disbursement, and the interest rate is 7.75%. You don't really have to apply for this loan if you're an international student by virtue of being admitted to the program and saying that and filling out a form that says that you will repay the loan, you are approved for the loan. And it's structured very much the same as a federal loan. It's a 10-year repayment schedule with a 6-month grace period. Let's talk a little bit about scholarship opportunities. Scholarships have a separate process, actually, and so you apply for scholarships. Financial need plays a role in who is given scholarships, but the first cut is always whether you are an exceptional candidate or not. The folks who distribute the scholarships really want to make sure that there are diverse perspectives and experience represented in the class. So when we go to take into consideration your need, what we're going to do is take the annual cost of attendance, so roughly $76,000. We're going to subtract any scholarships that you may have. So let's say you are given a $6,000 scholarship. Your need then would be $70,000. Then we take what is called the estimated family contribution, or EFC, from your FAFSA if you are a domestic student. And let's say the government thinks that you can pay $20,000 a year towards your education, so we will subtract that. So we get to $50,000. And $50,000 would be your need. You may also be interested in looking at external resources for scholarships, and these are some great websites that I recommend to our students. FastWeb, Peterson's, College Board, scholarships.com have great search engines that will help you narrow your search to graduate schools, to people with healthcare interests, those sorts of things. AAUW actually gives scholarships to women in business, and the NSHMBA, National Black MBA, gives scholarships to minority candidates, not necessarily African Americans. So those are some really great external resources as well. If you are awarded an external scholarship, we do subtract that from your cost of attendance when we consider your need. I also want to spend a little bit of time talking to the loan forgiveness program because it is the most generous loan forgiveness program at any business school in the United States. So essentially what it does is it takes your need-based loans and it turns them into grants if you go and work for the public good or in the public sector. So eligibility is really based on who you're working for. So you can work for government here or abroad. You can work for a nonprofit. Your income level and whether you had need or not. So those are the three biggest factors. And the idea here is that, as I'm sure you have all seen in your careers, people are able to flow in and out of the public sector and public good to the private sector. So we want to make sure our graduates are eligible for up to 10 years after graduation and any time during those 10 years. So if you graduate as part of the class of 2016 and go into the private sector, and then 2 years later in 2018 you go and work for the state of Nebraska, then you do that for 2 years, you would be given prorated loan forgiveness for the 2 years where you are working for the nonprofit or government employers. And that is the line about continuous participation, not required. So this really breaks down a little bit more on the types of employment. As I said, the overarching theme here is public good or public service. So that those are defined by different tax codes. We specifically do not allow self-employment. We prorate for part-time employment. We give family leave as well. Excuse me, I'm just going to mute that phone as it's ringing. We also take into account your salary, and we'll adjust that a little bit for every child that you have. Spouses are not considered dependents. We have what's called the concept of the full support cap. So your income below, if you have need and your income is below $83,000 a year when you graduate, 100% of those need-based loans that you took out will be paid off on a 10-year repayment schedule. If you make over $105,000 a year, then you are not eligible for loan forgiveness. And between the 83 and 105, we will prorate your loan forgiveness eligibility on a sliding scale. And again, a 10-year repayment scheme. And so essentially, the idea here is to give this resource to our neediest graduates who are benefiting the mission of the school. Does anyone have any questions on financial aid or how to apply? Again, I'll just run through the process really quickly, and that's a question that seems to have come in. So when you apply and you are admitted, I'm going to assume that you are an American student. You complete the FAFSA, which is the Federal Application for Student Aid, and you have it sent to Yale University. This information will also be sent to you. And so we get that information and we turn that around and we send you your need eligibility. The scholarship piece, frankly, is factored in after the scholarship committee for the MBA program meets in the spring semester. So there may be a little bit of adjustment. So many of our graduates then choose to take out the direct loan or that eligibility $20,500 and then pair it with a private loan, or depending on what those rates will be fixed at next year, take out more funds via direct plus loans. Any other questions? I'm just going to check here for questions. There's a question here on obtaining a list of private vendors. So again, I apologize, that might have been an older question, but we do have a list that we will publish to our admitted students of private lenders that students from across Yale and graduate professional schools have used over the past 3 to 4 years. It's probably about 8 or 9 different vendors, and they all offer robust programs and different terms as well. So we don't publish exactly what their interest rates are because those interest rates will vary based on your credit, but they've all been tried and true programs. We are seeing more vendors getting back into the private loan space as well, which is always beneficial to our students. One thing I'm very happy to do for all of the admitted students to the MBA program, frankly, because many of you are working, so you just have a different schedule than our other students who are here on campus full-time. But I'm very happy to, once you complete your FAFSA, so we know financially kind of where you stand, to set up a telephone meeting and really go through how to finance your MBA on a one-on-one basis, because I think that's particularly helpful for you. Another question came in about the loan forgiveness program. When do you find out whether you are able to participate in the loan forgiveness program? The loan forgiveness program is actually an eligibility program, or sorry, not an eligibility program. You are eligible based on entitlement, so it's an entitlement program. And assuming you work for, you have need, and assuming you work for the public good or public sector, and assuming your income is somewhere below 105, those dollar figures actually move every year, then you will receive repayment from the loan forgiveness fund. So it's not like it's something you have to worry about your eligibility for as long as you pass those 3 hurdles. But operationally how that works is you will graduate in May, and because of the grace period, you'll have 6 months. And then the first time your your loan goes into repayment, that's when you start in the loan forgiveness program after graduation. So we're looking at essentially November of the year you graduate. Great. Oh, there's another question that just came in. There's actually a few questions that just came in. So the question was really more around, the 3 questions were around scholarships. I actually do not sit on the scholarship committee, so I'm not privy exactly to how decisions are made. there are limited scholarship resources, and that committee actually does meet later in the spring, is my understanding. And again, it's a combination of need is part of the assessment, but really the first cut is, who are our exceptional candidates whose perspectives we really want and need in the classroom, and then who have need as well. So in order to be able to be part of that conversation, you really need to have completed your FAFSA so that your need can be determined. And let me know if you have other scholarship questions. Great. Well, at this point, since there are no other questions, again, my name is Rebecca Melville. If you do have any other questions, my email address is right here, somfinancialaid@yale.edu. I'd be more than happy to discuss anything with you. And if you are admitted to the program, I really would encourage you to reach out and we can have a one-on-one conversation, especially once you complete your FAFSA, because of usually your more complex circumstances. I'd be happy to guide you through the fascinating world of financial aid. Thank you very much.